Stuart Kin is an author that I refer to a lot in my videos, and I refer to a lot in my research. Although he didn't have any formal training in anthropology, he contributed a lot to the study of everything from Chinese gambling games to African art, and especially to the history of board games. He wrote several significant works between 1887 and 1907. They focus specifically on the games of the American Indians and the games of Asian cultures. This video is about one of the games that he recorded for posterity. Stuart Kin was one of the assistant curators at the Columbian Exposition in Chicago in 1893. With his colleague Frank Cushing, they brought foreign cultures to the exposition for people to see. This included not only Asians, but the Native Americans. And this experience developed into a serious effort to record as much as he could about these cultures and about their games and pastimes and sports. Mr. Kin believed that the games and activities of these various cultures tied us together at a very anthropological level. The more that previously isolated cultures get together, the more that they would assimilate each other's games and the way that they challenge themselves intellectually. The subject of this video is evidence of that cultural assimilation. Tuknanavuhpi is a game that's been played for several hundred years by the Hopi Indians in southwestern America, as well as some of the neighboring tribes. It appears to have roots, as do several other games in that area, in the European game called Alquerques that was brought to the New World by the conquistadors in the 15th century. It's a jump and capture game, kind of in the family of checkers or drafts, that was recorded by Kin in 1907. But it has its own unique personality. Let's have a look at the rules. The board is a matrix of 41 points with both diagonal and orthogonal connecting lines. Each of two players begins the game with 20 pieces set up as shown here. The center space is empty. The pieces, by the way, are called pokmoita, which means animals. The objective is to eliminate all of your opponent's pieces, or, if no more moves are possible, to have the most pieces left on the board at the end of the game. The player colors are determined by blind selection, and the lighter pieces traditionally make the first move. On each turn, the player must either move a piece from one intersection to the next, or perform a jumping move. When an adjacent piece is jumped, a typical short jump, it's immediately removed from the board. Then, if another jump is possible, the active player may choose to continue jumping and removing pieces. Now, here's the interesting twist to the game. When a complete row or column of spaces at the outer edge of the play area becomes empty, that row or column becomes off-limits for the rest of the game. Thereby, the game board will become smaller as the game goes on. Eventually, the board shrinks to a point where legal moves might not be possible, and the game ends before either player is eliminated. In this case, the player with the most pieces remaining in play is the winner, or the game is tied. In a variation of the game called Tuknanavuhpi, the rules state that any row of empty spaces becomes off-limits. That would even include diagonals that reach the edges of the board. And that means that pieces could get isolated from the rest of the board and then would have to be abandoned. Some records say that either of those games can be played by 2 or 4 players. Now, I'm not sure how that works. Maybe it's a team play type of an arrangement. Another very similar game called Ayahuatztani is played by the Quiras people from New Mexico. The name means chuck away grains, which I guess is related to the removal of the captured pieces. Ayahuatztani is played exactly the same way as Tuknanavuhpi, except that the capturing is mandatory. In Tunisia, North Africa, there's a very similar game called Karbaga. It's played more like checkers, but still, if there's an empty row created, the board shrinks in a very similar way. So there are several fascinating games to try when you get bored with checkers. Give them a try and let me know what you think. I'm always curious to know your opinions of these games, or any references you can find that will lead us to more information that we can share. So meanwhile, whether you play Tuknanavuhpi or Karbaga or Ayawatstani, you know what I say. Be sure to play every day.